Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric. I come from Cameroon and currently based at the University of Birmingham, where I'm doing a PhD in environmental law, specifically around the area of climate change lawmaking. So my presentation this afternoon is kind of related to my current research, which is looking at how local indigenous knowledge of communities fit into the process of lawmaking, given that it's a phenomenon that is global now, where countries are looking at putting in place national adaptation laws, and this whole issue of local knowledge and practice is something that seems to have been sidelined, though it's as recognized as an important contribution for communities that are grappling with this whole issue of climate change. So I'll be looking at what local knowledge and practices and technologies are, and also what that means in the Western Highlands of Cameroon, and looking at how linkages have been built between other knowledge systems to be able to build hybrid systems for climate adaptations in that part of Cameroon, and what lessons and recommendations for this. Of course, climate change is an issue of global significance, particularly for rural communities where agriculture is the life wire and depends on favorable climate. But these very communities are less of drivers and agents of climate change, with their contributions being significantly marginal. Of course, these local communities are not only victims of climate change. Over the years and over decades, over generations, they've been able to develop and use their local knowledge and practices. And that is something that is prominent where I come from in the northwest of Cameroon. Unfortunately, there is a huge challenge when it comes to valuing these knowledge systems and making use of them when it comes to building community resilience and ecosystem resilience. One of the major challenges actually defining what these local knowledge and practices are, how they are developed, how they are used. And of course, in my work, I define it as a body of knowledge on people's ways of knowing and doing, which is evolving and used for individual and collective decision making to enhance living within their means. And of course, there's been contestations about what it is. Is it homogeneous? Is it generally communally owned? Or is it a common pool resource that can be used on a consensus basis? Is it locally based or context tied? Is it tacit knowledge, interpersonal, intergenerational relationships, participatory knowledge? And this has been discussions where different scholars have actually looked at this. And so we went out in that part of Cameroon to actually engage with communities to record, establish what this local knowledge and practice, and we actually use semi-structured interviews and photo voice documentations where these communities were able to describe what this local knowledge were, how it was developed, the possibilities of uptake and adoption, and this level of effectiveness, the impacts and the use of this local knowledge for food security, diversification of livelihoods in uncertain climate, and the contribution and constraints to its adoption. And so this is kind of, the number of stakeholders we engaged with, and also took part in extended on-farm observations of demonstrations and use of local knowledge and practices. Of course, some of the questions we're asking is whether respondents were keen on sharing knowledge, because one of the gaps was the possibility of this knowledge system being lost over time. And so 92.5% of the farmers we spoke to said, well, they are keen on always sharing this knowledge. And how was it shared? Through on-farm practices, especially storytelling, group visits, through songs and dances, cultural events. And so there's a huge avenue of, developing and enhancing these very knowledge systems to be able to address the whole notion of it being lost over time. And so we also ask, has the knowledge been documented? And generally, most of this knowledge has not been documented, and clearly it ties to the possibility of this knowledge being lost over time. And so we ask the communities what, in terms of revenues they've generated by the use of these local knowledge and practices to produce organic food substances to enhance their well-being, and also to sell some of these organic food products, and the revenues they generated from that to be able to enhance other livelihood needs. And so in this table, you would see the frequency of, the respondents who said they had generated between 1,000 CFAs to over 1,500,000 CFAs. And so began looking at context. And so we got in touch with colleagues in Tanzania, specifically the Tanzania Meteorological Organization. There was a colleague working there and one in the Zambian College of Agriculture, and started exploring how we could compare the practices in those different contexts, looking at Central Africa, Eastern, Southern Africa, and some colleagues in Kenya as well. And so, of course, lessons learned from this whole experience is that these communities are not only victims. I mean, we develop a compendium just to take you back again. I can share this with anyone who is interested to look at some of these practices in these different contexts: Cameroon, Tanzania, and Zambia. And so, for the lessons, as I said, they are not only victims. Their understanding and perception of climate change could contribute to address the phenomenon. And they have an invaluable store of knowledge and practice that, if well harnessed, can generate a bottom-up dynamics that merge with the current top-down scientific knowledge for responsive climate adaptation. And well, communities, local indigenous knowledge, of course, are at risk of being lost. And policy planning at national and sub-national levels, when we look at the Cameroon scenario and in other contexts, does not fully value and strengthen or integrate these knowledge systems and integrate the developers as major contributors to be able to address the whole phenomenon of climate change and its impact on agrarian communities. And so what have we been able to do at the national level? We've been able to engage in the national framework lawmaking process in Cameroon, where we feedback, what we found at the community level. We've been able to engage direct policy advocacy targeting decentralized local councils, and some of these have included the use of local knowledge in their budgets, and also the scientific data and community local indigenous knowledge and practice has been put side by side to be able to develop hybrid solutions to enhance local adaptation and feeding that into the national policy adaptation process in Cameroon. And of course,
1 minute and 30 seconds.
Yeah, this has gone beyond the Cameroon context, where we've actually sourced for resources. For example, the Africa Evidence Network has recognized what we are doing in the National Geographic Society, and we are looking at extending this work. So, of course, this current experience is informing my research, my PhD research, where I'm looking at how local knowledge and the constraints and what enhances or not the incorporation of local knowledge and practices in the lawmaking process. And I'm looking at that using the Kenya experience for my PhD. Thank you very much. And we have some links there I could share on how we've documented these experiences through YouTubes and different public engagement activities. Yeah, that's in my local language. Thank you, merci, gracias.